Phil Perry from NBC Sports Boston is here. He covers the Patriots. And, okay, so the vibe around the team last week was dire in that, you had the ex-coach and all these people calling out Gerard Mayo for saying the players were soft. And here come the Jets. You're a 7-point dog. You drive the field 2 times to ensure victory. Has the vibe noticeably changed to you this week?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. I thought the vibe last week around this time was pissed off, quite frankly, from the players that I had spoken to, and I went out of my way to talk to linemen on both sides of the ball because they were really the guys who had been called out and the guys whose manhoods, if you want to put it that way, had been challenged. And so this week, I haven't sensed any pissiness, so that part of it is different, and I think it just makes life a little bit easier for everybody when you win a game. It's such a slog. It's such a grind when you are 6 losses in a row. They also had this Monday off. So guys I felt like were pretty open about it. Jacoby Brissett even at his press conference yesterday talking about how guys seemed pretty well rested because they had a victory Monday, quote unquote, right after the game. So yeah, different vibe in there. And I think that's okay. I know there were people who after Sunday and seeing some of the reactions at the podium, in the locker room, hearing from guys talk about how they were ecstatic after beating the Jets. I know there were people who sort of looked at that sideways because we talked about it a little bit on TV on Monday, saying, should you guys really be celebrating much of anything? The Jets kind of gave you that game, first off. Second off, you're really not that good. And the receiver room is still a problem. And you did still make a bunch of mistakes. And you know what, though? I look at it and I say, if you can't appreciate when you have won a football game, when you are the New England Patriots in 2024, and there might only be 3 or 4 of these things this season, that to me only makes things worse. I don't want them to be Eeyore all year just because they're not a good team.
And you see this with coaches now in college and everything else. You got to let a team have fun. Like, you have to allow a team, like even the locker room on Belichick teams after wins, like, were allowed to like at least be boisterous. If you win a game, I don't understand the complaints at all about if you're not allowed to enjoy a victory, then what's the incentive of winning a game? Like, because we're not going to win the Super Bowl, but I still have to go out there and compete every week. I'd rather win than lose. If you don't let them celebrate, it's like, do you know any college coaches, or there might be, or NFL coaches who like don't want their players celebrating after touchdowns? Like, Tomlin's like a hard ass, right? But you don't think Pickens, like, and everyone's got like something, like, you got to be able to enjoy the victories. Now, if you're the Bears and you have a defensive back who's taunting the crowd while there's a Hail Mary being thrown, that's a different story. But once the game's done, the game's done. You should enjoy it. I think there's a good sign.
Yeah.
They want to win.
I think so, too. And I just think it's maybe a little bit of a holdover from the Belichick era, where when they won games, he would be harder on them after the fact and point out everything that they did wrong. There are mistakes in every game, certainly in their last one.
But in the locker room and after the game, were the players not like happy when they won? Like, was it a different vibe?
There were times where Belichick would address the team and say, essentially, I know we won, but
it's Wednesday.
And lay out everything.
It's Wednesday already. We gotta get back to work.
We got a better team next week, and if we don't clean this, up, then we're gonna be somewhere we don't want to be by the end of the season.
Well, that's difficult.
It was not game balls and hugs and handshakes all the time, even after wins.
Well, that's difficult if you don't have Tom Brady to be an ancillary coach and kind of.
Well, the standard was different back then, and rightfully so. Like, I think people want that standard to return. And that's fair to want it eventually, but to expect it now is completely different and not fair.
And plus, I don't think a modern coach can do that. I don't think a modern coach can behave that way, and we saw it with Belichick. Belichick won 4 games last year. He lost to the Jets in his final game. Like, Belichick was a terrible personnel guy and no doubt a very good defensive coach, but was not particularly a good head coach without Tom Brady, and maybe that's part of that is because his ways of coaching. Like, do you think if Bear Bryant like they've unfroze Bear Bryant and they go like run spring practice like you used to run the Alabama ones,
Junction Boys,
you can't. I mean, just times change and things from 25 years ago don't resonate with people today. It's a whole new generation. All right, how's Drake Maye doing?
Pretty good. I mean, the fact that he was practicing yesterday, he was able to practice for 30 minutes. And when Mayo told us that was sort of an indication that he was in phase 3 of the 5-phase return to participation part of the NFL's concussion protocol. That to me means he has a legitimate shot at playing on Sunday. And I think there is optimism there that he will be able to play on Sunday. Now, we'll see how it goes. Phase 4, if he's into phase 4 by today, is basically more practice. So phase 3 is 30 minutes of practice. Phase 4 is more.
But we're not going to know because limited is limited, correct?
Unless somebody's able to tell us, right? We'll talk to Alex Van Pelt today. If he says something along the lines of, we'll get to see him throw a little bit more today, then maybe that's a sign that he's into phase 4. You get a test, a neurocognitive and a balance test, apparently, at the end of phase 4 before you can move into phase 5. Phase 5 is your trainer has cleared you for play, and then the league's independent neurological consultant then clears you to play as well, and then he would be able to play on Sunday. So he's got enough time between now and Sunday to be able to check those boxes. It's just a question of, is he symptom-free or not?
So how do the Patriots prepare for this Sunday with May in limbo and Brissett just kind of sitting over there on the side? He may play, he may not play.
I think what they'll do is they'll play, or they'll practice, assuming May will be able to play. And then if he can't, you do what you did on Sunday, which is you tweak whatever the Drake May game plan was in real time or in short order for Jacoby Brissett and say, sorry, Jacoby, we would have loved to prepare all week as though you were the guy, but this is what they have to do now to give themselves the best chance to win, is just assume Drake May will play. And then, listen, this is one of the benefits of having Jacoby Brissett as your backup quarterback. It's nothing he's not used to, right? Going in essentially an emergency situation when he did not prepare as the number one guy.
Right.
So I think that's the way you would have to do it. They have core plays that both those guys are really accustomed to running all the way back to the beginning of training camp. But the best thing for them to do would be, in my opinion, assume May is going to play because of where he's at already in the protocol. And then if he can't, you just throw Jacoby to the Wolves.
Anything else with the trade deadline coming up, and anything with the mood around the team after Uche was traded, and conversations about what could be happening next?
Yeah, so Uche, in terms of impacting the team's mood, I don't think there was much of one. I think everybody understands that one. It's a guy who wasn't playing very much defensively or on special teams, and you got very little for him, and I think you just wish him well if you're a player in that locker room right now. The interesting part of the trade deadline this year for me, there are a couple things, but I want to get you guys' take on this. Because they do have a handful of veteran players that I think would have real value to other teams that are contending. I'd look at Devon Godchaux, I would look at Jonathan Jones, and I'd look at Kendrick Bourne and say all those guys could contribute to good teams right now. I would not trade any of them.
Okay.
Because I believe that where they're at organizationally right now, having program guys, quote unquote, or culture guys, quote unquote, has real value and more value than whatever would come back to you in a trade where the prices have been really low. I don't know how closely you guys have been following the deadline of the deals that have already been made.
We discussed this a couple of days ago. Yeah.
Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, these are good players. These are contributing players that are going for next to nothing.
Yeah.
The Jaguars just traded a left tackle for, I think, a conditional 5th round pick.
Yeah.
So
last year of his contract, but yeah.
Would you trade Kendrick Bourne for a 7th round pick or a future 6th or something along those lines when I think he's somebody who actually elevates the energy in that room and not only the receiver room, but in the locker room in general? And I think he's a professional in a receiver room that is lacking professionals.
Supremely
in my
positive
opinion.
guy. And yeah, you're gonna have more games where and probably stretches throughout the last half of the season where you're going to need some unfounded positivity in there because it's probably going to get a little
worse,
a little on the dark side. Yeah.
And guys that are just on board, right? That are on board and are able to, whether you're Godchaux or Jones, just remain professional regardless of how dark it gets. And be that lead by example type of player that other guys can look at, younger guys specifically can look at and say, boy, I know this sucks right now. But if that's how he's doing it, if that's how he's going about his workouts during the week, if that's how he's taking notes, even though we're 2-11, I guess that's probably how I should be doing it too. I just feel like there's more value in that. And so I would be really reluctant to trade some of your most valuable, quote unquote, trade chips.
Yeah, I would be too. There is something about building a culture, and that's why I think the win on Sunday was so important. is that this is not a team tanking for draft position. This is a team rebuilding. I mean, if you get a top, 2 pick, congratulations, you can trade out of it and pick up more ammunition. But you have a new coach and you're trying to establish a good culture, and you seem to have your quarterback, and so that I agree with you.
I have a question. Jonathan Jones is not signed beyond this season, correct? I mean,
Right.
If you do trade him, I don't think this is going to really cripple your defense. I have no trouble with letting a guy like that go, regardless of how sunshiny his outlook is.
But what about a 6th-round pick, though? Like, is it worth a 6th-round pick?
Look, if you get a 6th-round pick, say you do, and the way the market is, that's probably close to the truth. You get a 6th or a 5th for Jonathan Jones. Maybe that 6th or 5th winds up being an add-in so you can move up and get a guy you really want in the 2nd round or even the 1st round. Or I don't know. Whatever way they drop, they won't go up in the 1st round. They'll drop back. So maybe that's a pick you can use to move up in the 2nd round and get the impact player you want.
It would just be very minimal. 6th and 7th round picks, like if you have a 2nd round pick that's in the 30s, and you want to get up to,
it's that extra fit. They already have an extra pick in this draft from Judon, right? So maybe we'll throw you the extra 3rd we got from Judon, the extra 6th, and maybe that gets you up further in the 2nd round. All I'm saying is it couldn't hurt, and you're looking for assets for this team moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that's totally legitimate if that's if you're looking at it from let's bring up the name again. From a Belichickian point of view, that's probably the coldest and most efficient and logical way of doing it. I just think where you're at, like think back to 2000 when Bill Belichick and Scott Pioli are building this roster up, and they've actually got a team that has a bunch of guys that already played in a Super Bowl that were Parcells guys, right? Between Ty Law and Ted Johnson and Teddy Bruschi and all. So they had a more talented team than what the Patriots have now in 2000. But Bill Belichick could have dealt away a number of good players. That was a bad season. They won 5 games that year. They could have dealt away a number of guys. And it was a different time. There weren't a ton of trades in the NFL back then. But they could have traded away guys for draft picks and just said, well, we're really shooting for 2002 or 2003 because it's a long-term rebuild. So let's trade Ted Johnson, right? Let's trade Otis Smith. But those guys ended up being core pieces for you moving forward, even though they weren't like as young as a Tom Brady or a Richard Seymour, and they helped you be good when you eventually got good, but they also helped just bring a professionalism and a certain culture to that room that really mattered.
So you think Jonathan Jones is one of those guys?
I think he's one of the few
around
guys
here in 3 or 4 years, and will he impact the winning culture?
I think he's impacting the winning culture now. And so 3 or 4 years, I don't know.
Well,
but does
you're
he
comparing him
do
to Ted
something?
Johnson?
But does he do something for? Does he do something for Christian Gonzalez, for example, in terms of helping him grow and learn what it means to be a good player in this league? That 4 or 5 years from now really impacts the kind of player Christian Gonzalez is. We don't know. I would just say that to me is more valuable than like if you just. I think the idea of using a 6th-round pick to trade up in the 2nd just is like not realistic. Like 6th-round picks, if you look at the trade value chart, are worth like, depending on where you are,
I'm saying 6th
like
rounder alone, but
15 points. 2nd-round picks are worth like 500 points.
It's an add-in you didn't have before that may give you an option you didn't have before, and that's what this team needs. That's all. And again, I wouldn't be saying this if Jones is one of those guys they had signed to a long-term contract. He's not.
Right.
Therefore, it doesn't seem to me like they see him as a core piece moving forward.
I just think I think what you're doing now matters in terms of what you're building. And even if those guys aren't necessarily here when you're good, I think it's okay to hold on to them now as you build. Like I just really am hesitant to acknowledge that this year means nothing. And if you trade those guys away, that's the message you're sending.
Last year
we'll look at it 2 years from now, guys. Don't worry about it.
Last year was totally different. It was the end of something. It's like you knew they had a pretty good sense that Bill was going to be gone, that Mac wasn't the guy. There are all these things. So last year would have said, you go ahead and trade anybody. If you can get something you can stockpile for the future, that's fine. That's good. Right now, even though these guys, as you just said, Phil, they may not be here for when the winning happens, you're still in the process of building right now. And you don't trade away pieces that are foundational, even if it's just a locker room culture.
Even and especially because you're not getting anything for it. Like Deontay Johnson, to me, is a good number 2 receiver. He's probably a great number 3. He's not a number 1, but he's fine. He's a good contributing player. he went for essentially what is going to end up being the difference of like a pick at the bottom of the 5th round and a pick at the top of the 6th round. It was a pick swap with the Ravens, who are going to be a good team this year, and the Panthers we know are one of the worst. So if that's all you're getting for him, like Jonathan Jones, you're willing to move down like 15 spots and just say goodbye to one of your most professional guys in a locker room that needs professionalism, that to me would be short-sighted. That's all.
All right. Well, listen, it's I agree. They need some wins, build a culture, and see where we're at. And then see how they draft, and then see what they can put around Drake Maye. Phil Perry, everyone loves him. NBC Sports Boston. Watch him as he takes care of all of this.
If you like that clip, and how could you not? Check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.